Hey guys, welcome back. Today I want to talk about Halo Infinite's story DLC and some ideas that I have that I think are kind of likely for potential story DLCs. Now, when we talk about story DLC, of course it's not been confirmed yet that we are getting story DLC, but I don't know. If you ask me, I reckon story DLC is as certain as the return of the Flood. And yes, that's me using a lot of hopium. Please. However, first what I want to try and do is kind of set the scene for these story DLCs by predicting how I think Halo Infinite's main campaign will end, so we can better talk about how the story DLC will kind of continue that story or branch off of that story. Now, predicting how the main campaign is going to end is going to be no easy feat, but I've got a pretty solid theory as to how I think it's going to end, given a number of different factors, both narrative and outside of the narrative, so let's waste no time and start off with that. I have a feeling that Halo Infinite's main campaign is going to end somewhat similar to how Halo Wars 2's main campaign ended, in that throughout the campaign, we're going to go through it and we're going to cause significant setbacks in the Banished war effort on Zeta Halo by defeating lieutenants within the Banished, like, for example, Okro Vagadoon. Feels bad, man. I really don't want to kill him, he's too cool, but I think we're gonna have to. Oh. We'll probably work our way through the Hand of Atriox and take down a few members of that, and maybe even to give the main campaign some sense of finality, we'll take down Escharum. I mean, in the trailer, Escharum was saying that this is his final fight with Chief, which definitely indicates a degree of finality. It'd be kind of weird if that final fight continued on past the main campaign. And I think what's going to happen as we do that is we're going to rally more UNSC forces to Zeta Halo, help us gain control of the Halo, but Atriox and the Banished will remain on the ring and will remain as a significant threat to humanity and, by extension, the rest of the galaxy on the Halo. I think the game will end kind of like Halo Wars 2 in something of like a glorified stalemate, where the UNSC have gone from being absolutely on the back foot at the start to rallying up and standing a fighting chance at either reclaiming the ring from the Banished or maybe even having reclaimed the ring, although I think that would maybe be a bit too far considering the 10-year plan. However, there is one thing, or kind of two things, that are missing from this plot: Cortana and the Created. Now, I have racked my brain trying to come up with how they might fit into this game and its narrative, and I can't really think of anything that's at least concrete. Maybe she'll take up the kind of antagonistic Forerunner role, kind of like what Guilty Spark and just Foreigners took in general in Halo 1, 2, and 3, controlling like sentinels and automated defenses and even the doors and stuff like that, or like what the Librarian and the Didact and Cortana kind of as well took up in Halo 4 and Halo 5. Maybe she'll have like an implicit role like that, where she's present but never like explicitly present. She's definitely not controlling the Banished at all. Like, Shadows of Reach basically entirely debunked that, and even if it didn't, that wouldn't make any sense given the Banished's motives. Maybe the auditorium that the Banished are after on Zeta Halo has something to do with her? I don't know, honestly. It's really hard to talk about Cortana and the Created in regards to Infinite's story because of all the marketing and trailers and everything that we've had so far. Cortana, the Created haven't even been mentioned once, I don't think, besides maybe offhand in Shadows of Reach. And Cortana has only been present twice, well, 3 times again if you count Shadows of Reach. She was in Discover Hope. I was getting mixed up. She was in Discover Hope, she was in the little Easter egg voice file that was found in Discover Hope, and she was mentioned as the apparition, as the Banished referred to her as, in Shadows of Reach. But beyond that, they've not been mentioned, so I guess they're kind of keeping that on the down low. We're going to have to wait until they start marketing the game more to understand how they fit in, but as of now, that is my story plan for Halo Infinite. That is basically my very bold prediction as to how I think the campaign will very roughly go, but it gives us kind of a foundation to build off in terms of DLCs that could continue that story. However, before we talk about what I think we could be getting in terms of story DLC for Halo Infinite, I want to talk about a new sponsor on the channel, Squarespace, who are sponsoring today's video to help me expand the HiddenXperia empire on our quest for world domination. Having my own website has always been something that I've kind of had in my mind, but With Squarespace, it was super easy to bring to life. My website is no Mona Lisa quite yet, right? But this only took me like 30 minutes to build, and it was insanely easy and honestly quite fun to do so. If you want to build a site like this, then start your Squarespace free trial today by going to squarespace.com/HiddenXperia and use code HiddenXperia to get 10% off your first purchase. When I was designing my site, I loved how easy and flexible the templates were. I mean, I started off with a template for a plant shop and ended up with a site that really looked like mine. And just for reference, the last website that I designed was a website for my Halo 3 and World at War clan in 2009 when I was in year 7 or 7th grade for you Americans out there. And let me tell you, I was no Pablo Picasso, and yet, using Squarespace, I somehow managed to design a site that looked this clean. If you're looking for a site for a hobby or to grow a business, then Squarespace really is for you. With the ability to track your traffic in detail to see where and who it's coming from, and the ability to embed videos for a smooth, seamless experience, as well as 24/7 customer support if you happen to get stuck designing your masterpiece, there really is no better place to start designing your website. So once again, if you're interested in starting your own website, start your Squarespace free trial today at squarespace.com/HiddenXperia and use code HiddenXperia to get 10% off your first purchase. My site is something that I really do want to keep updating, so if you have any suggestions for things that I should add or change, then let me know down below in the comments. Thank you to Squarespace for being a new sponsor in 2021, and let's dive into some Infinite Story DLCs. So, the first story DLC is one that I think is probably the most likely out of all of them, and that is Halo Infinite ODST. Boy, that has a good ring to it. So, an ODST kind of expansion or spin-off was something that 343 were actually kind of planning post-Halo 5. I think it was about 2 years ago now, Bonnie Ross did an interview with IGN where she said that post-Halo 5 in like 2017, they were originally going to release a Halo 5 ODST styled game, but her and Phil Spencer decided at the last minute to cancel it and get all hands on deck for Halo Infinite. But this is something that really would work so well as either a story DLC or, of course, a spin-off. With the kind of semi-gritty and guerrilla warfare atmosphere that Infinite seems to be going for, where humanity are very much on the back foot and are having to use anything they can find to fight back against the Banished, a grounded ODST experience would fit right in, even more so when you consider the faction that we're fighting, the Banished, are incredibly violent and have a very gritty aesthetic and style to them. Honestly, I think one of the reasons that ODST worked so well as a game and as a different experience was because we were fighting the brutes primarily in it. We weren't fighting like sleek, alien elites that have honor in battle and that respect their enemies. We were fighting the most brutal enemy possible, with no regard for honor or respect in battle, just an insatiable bloodlust. Pairing the kind of weaker and more nerfed down experience of playing as an ODST as opposed to a Spartan, where you've got no power armor, you don't have energy shieldings, you don't have special abilities or anything, you're just a soldier in slightly better armor than Marines, with the kind of raw power and primal aggression of fighting brutes, is a perfect combination. And it really amplifies that kind of on the back foot theme that Halo is trying to return to, so really, what better time is there to reintroduce that contrast between the weaker ODSTs and the stronger, more aggressive brutes? In terms of characters, I mean, Alpha 9 are now almost entirely reformed. Obviously, Rookie's not there, but everyone else has been reformed, and I believe are on the Infinity? I might be wrong there, but Bad Blood reformed Alpha 9, so there's nothing to stop 343 from quite literally doing a sequel to Halo 3 ODST, which I think a lot of people would love to see. But something that big, I could see them saving for a spin-off as opposed to a story DLC. But as well, I mean, the Infinity has so many ODSTs on board. I mean, we saw a load of them getting wrecked in the Infinite trailer, in that little screen where Chief sees all the casualties. We saw a lot of ODST squads going down, but I mean, maybe they could introduce a new fire team of ODSTs that are like some of the few survivors of that war with the Banished. If they do introduce a new squad of ODSTs, I really hope they make them as kind of unique and varied as Alpha 9 or also Sunray 1-1 from Halo Wars 2. They were a really cool squad as well. I think with ODSTs being more human and more kind of down-to-earth and grounded characters as opposed to Spartans, they thrive a lot more off being far more varied characters and characters with very different traits to one another, because they don't have like the super abilities of Spartans to make them stand out. They are more human, so the way their characters kind of react and bounce off of each other makes them more interesting. We absolutely saw that with Alpha 9 in ODST, and I would love to see that again with either Alpha 9 again or a new ODST squad on the Infinity. Now, moving on to the second story DLC, this is something that I would pay a lot of money that I don't have to see this happen. A Banished DLC, a DLC where we play as the enemy. Now, this could take so many different forms, at least in terms of the gameplay. If they bring back playable elites, we could play as an elite, notably, fingers crossed, a Silent Shadow elite. That's the dream right there. Or, if they want to go even crazier, we could play as like a brute commander or a brute lieutenant or like maybe even a member of the Hand of Atriox. But ultimately, at least for me, I don't actually think that who, or rather what species we play as, is the most important thing if we were to get a Banished DLC. Rather, at least for me, I'm more interested in seeing the inner workings of the Banished in a first-person game where a narrative can really be fleshed out. That would be the main draw for me for this story DLC. I absolutely love it when games show us the other side, the enemy side of a conflict that we've been so engrossed in on one side. I mean, a great example of this, honestly, is Battle for Middle-earth. If any of you guys have ever played the Lord of the Rings RTS, playing the War of the Ring from Isengard and Mordor's side, as a huge Lord of the Rings fan, was such a cool change of pace and change of scenery. Seeing all the battles and fighting all the battles from the other side was always so cool. And I mean, one of the reasons that I love Halo 2 so much is that it gave us that insight into the Covenant. We played as the enemy and realized that this war wasn't all black and white. Not everybody in the Covenant was a completely evil, genocidal alien that wanted to wipe humanity out. They had differing beliefs and differing views, and the way they interacted with each other wasn't as cut and dry as maybe Combat Evolved made it seem. And I think something like this would be a fantastic way to flesh the Banished out in the same vein that the Arbiter missions fleshed out the Covenant in Halo 2. There was really only so much they could do in terms of fleshing the Banished out in Halo Wars 2 with it being an RTS. Like, even with Awakening the Nightmare, where we literally played as the Banished, being an RTS kind of constrains what you can do narratively. There's a lot of restraints put in place with that style of game that aren't there with first-person shooters. We also had Rise of Atriox, which was great, but it was really just a prequel to kind of show how the Banished were formed. And then Shadows of Reach gave us our kind of first proper taste of this. I mean, the Banished chapters in Shadows of Reach, I will honestly say, are some of my favorite chapters in any Halo book I've ever read. I absolutely loved them, and I was gagging for more. I needed more. And what better way to give us more than have us play as them in Halo Infinite? Humanizing the enemy faction, or at least some members of that enemy faction, and transforming a conflict with that faction from being simply black and white to an entire grey area where there's good and bad on both sides is a fantastic way to not only make your narrative like objectively deeper and more engaging, but also to add impact to the actions that you make against that faction. I mean, the greatest example of this so far is Okro Vagadoon. All we've seen so far is literally like 2 frames of an assassination mission that we can take to take out Okro Vagadoon in Infinite. And after reading Sacrifices, I want to meet him in game, but I don't want to kill him because he was such a cool character. The depth that Sacrifices added to the Banished and to Okro Vagadoon, who otherwise would have just been a generic evil elite NPC that we had to go and kill, is fantastic, and it adds so much weight to the actions that you take against them in game. And really, I think of all the factions in Halo, the Banished, a faction with a vastly different origin story and vastly different motives, would be the perfect recipient of a story DLC like this. It'd be a great vector to flesh out the Banished and its kind of inner workings by shining light on conflicts and narratives that arise within the faction that otherwise, from the UNSC side, we'd never see. It'd be a great way to humanise members of the faction, think Okro Vagadoon. It'd be a fantastic way to provide entirely new gameplay experiences depending on who or what species we play as, and also, for the first time ever, it would make humans the enemy in gameplay, which I know quite a lot of people have wanted to see, and it would certainly be an interesting move to Halo, a move that I'm all for. Banished story DLC, please, 343. Now, the third and penultimate story DLC is something that you guys know I want a lot, and I know that you guys want it a lot. The Return of the Flood. Now, I'll be honest guys, I'm starting to get a little bit doubtful that the Flood are going to be in Infinite's main campaign. I wouldn't put it past 343 to do some super secretive like 343 Guilty Spark style reveal and just never mention them before launch. I really hope they do, but I think with the kind of overall motif of Infinite being about restoring hope and about fighting from nothing and overcoming immense hurdles, I think throwing a galaxy-ending parasite in there would be kind of counterintuitive and just wouldn't really work, at least at first. It'd either destroy the entire tone of the story by completely setting humanity back like God knows how long, or humanity would just defeat the outbreak really quickly, just wipe it off the board, and it would have no impact whatsoever, and the Flood's return would be completely ruined. Like, I just don't see it fitting in the main story. However, all hope is not lost just yet. With the 10-year plan for Infinite and how I think the game is going to end, I think that the next 10 years of Halo's main story are going to be primarily about this kind of constantly evolving battle for Zeta Halo and how that battle affects the ring and affects the rest of the galaxy. Which, in my opinion, is the perfect opportunity to slowly tease and reintroduce the Flood. Ultimately, I would much rather have the Flood's return be kind of like a slow burn, heavily teased thing that, when it eventually does happen, feels so impactful and feels like it was so worth the wait, as opposed to just like a kind of fan-servicey reintroduction where they're reintroduced just to get the Flood in the back of the box, and then they're wiped off the table again like that. It would really neuter their presence, I think, and it would kind of ruin their themes. I really love the idea of Zeta Halo evolving over time, and of stories and narratives emerging from the changes the Halo undergoes and the war on the Halo undergoes, and I think reintroducing the Flood through that would be the perfect way to do it. And I mean, we've said it so many times before, but you know what, I'm gonna keep saying it. Zeta Halo is the most perfect place in the entire Halo universe to reintroduce the Flood. The mirrors it would create between the Forerunner Flood War, the Forerunner trilogy of books, that entire narrative, and also events that predated that are honestly just too perfect, almost coincidentally perfect for it not to happen. And something else that I think people kind of sleep on with the return of the Flood happening at some point is, if it were to happen in Halo Infinite on Zeta Halo, it'd be really interesting to see how Atriox and the Banished kind of react to it after awakening the Nightmare and after their multiple times encountering them, at least some members of the Banished, in the Covenant. I mean, it could even kind of lead to a temporary alliance between humanity and the Banished, because Atriox knows full well the true threat of the Flood, and so does Chief, and I think both would want to assure above all else that they don't leave Zeta Halo and spread across the galaxy, because ultimately their short-term goals would mean nothing if that happened. And I mean, maybe this is an insane stretch, but we saw humanity and the elites ally to stop the Covenant, but also the Flood, and we got a back-to-back scene out of that, as you can see on my shirt. Who's to say we don't get some kind of crazy Chief and Atriox back-to-back scene as well, to both literally and also thematically mirror the one in Halo 3. I mean, that is a crazy long shot, don't get me wrong, but a guy can dream, right? A guy can dream. And the final story DLC, the fourth and final one, is yet another one that I could see both being either a story DLC or an actual spin-off game as a whole, and once again, to say that it would be in high demand is probably the understatement of the century. An Arbiter DLC. Now, Arbiter is probably the #1 character that people want to return in some capacity in Infinite, bar none. And I mean, Keith David the other day, the guy tweeted something like kind of semi-jokey, not spoiling anything, not saying anything, just kind of semi-jokey about the Arbiter at Infinite, and just instantly, thousands of people got their hype like over the moon. People got so excited just because of one simple tweet. If that doesn't show the demand for Arbiter, then I don't know what does. I'm really holding out hope that the Arbiter and the Swords of Zengheilios make something of an appearance in the main campaign, but I can definitely see them kind of saving that for campaign DLC or a spin-off. And I mean, with the ever-evolving state of Zeta Halo with this 10-year plan thing, I could see them doing something like a Swords of Zengheilios Reinforcements DLC where, like, I don't know, they do some like Fortnite-style live in-game event where the Shadow of Intent appears above Zeta Halo along with a bunch of other Swords of Zengheilios ships with, like, I don't know, Arbiter, Arthas, Entho, Utsei-Taham, Tulduraan, and all like the major Swords of Zengheilios characters on board. And that leads to like a full elite-focused spin-off story in-game as a story DLC in which they try and help the UNSC drive back the Banished and reclaim Zeta Halo. And now that I think about it, there could actually be a tenuous but still kind of possible reason for this to happen. We've heard Escharum talking about the Harbinger, and a lot of people, myself included, kind of believe this Harbinger could maybe be a prophet of some degree. Not a Covenant-style prophet, because the Banished would definitely not work with one, but maybe a prophet that was manipulating the Banished to get control of the Halo so that it could use it to start the Great Journey. Maybe this Harbinger, this prophet, was deceiving the Banished to get control of the ring for its own gain. I mean, that would be very in line with the nature of a prophet. I wouldn't put it past a prophet to do that, so it would make sense. And if this were the case, then it would make even more sense for Arthas to bring the Shadow of Intent to Zeta Halo, because post-Halo 3, Arthas dedicated himself to hunting down the remaining prophets in the galaxy, and if he found out that one of these prophets had managed to gain control of a Halo ring, you can bet your ass that he would want to get the Arbiter to back him up and send all the forces they had to stop him from firing it and starting the Great Journey. That's a bit of a long shot because we still have no idea who this Harbinger thing is, but I mean, I don't think it's entirely out of the realms of possibility. But going back to talking about the DLC itself, I feel like even though it would probably be marketed as the return of the Arbiter, and would definitely start off with you playing as the Arbiter again, I feel like ultimately it could really transcend just the Arbiter and be about the elites and the Swords of Zengheilios in general. Like, imagine having, like, playable characters that constantly swap between major players in the faction. Like, you play as Arthas for one mission, and then you play as Tulduraan with the energy staff for a mission or something like that. Really mix it up in terms of characters and gameplay, and flesh out a bunch of individual elites that really haven't had any fleshing out for a long, long time. Not only would it be great to play as the Arbiter and as the elites again, but fighting actually alongside humanity as a different species for the first time ever would be a really cool experience, actually. Being an elite and having human allies, I mean, okay, well, I guess technically Great Journey in Halo 2 kind of had this with Johnson, but I mean in like a bigger scale, you know what I mean. It'd also be really interesting to kind of just see how the Arbiter and Arthas and kind of the Swords in general would react to a faction like the Banished, who have vastly different motives to anything Covenant or really any other Covenant faction that they've ever dealt with. I could kind of in a way see the Arbiter sympathizing with Atriox, because at the end of the day, Atriox does just want the best for his soldiers. He wants the best for his men. He wants the best for everyone who serves under him. That's why they joined the Banished in the first place. And seeing the Arbiter kind of learn about that and see how he'd react to it and how he'd maybe even interact with Atriox based on that would be really interesting to see. That alone would be a great reason to get this DLC, but I mean, bringing back the Arbiter as a playable character is an absolute dream, so I'm going to say it one more time. 343, please. And with that said, that's all I want to talk about today. Let me know your favourite story DLC down below in the comments, or if you have any idea for a story DLC that I didn't mention in this video. I mean, there's so many potential ideas that I could sit here for like 15 hours and talk about them all, but you gotta cut it short somewhere. So I feel like these 4 that I mentioned in this video are probably 4 of the most likely and 4 that I would love to see the most. So Yeah, let me know your thoughts down below in the comments. And with that said, I'm going to end the video there. I want to give a massive thank you to all of my amazing patrons for all the continued support over there. I really do appreciate you guys. And thank you all so much for watching. I appreciate everyone who watches my videos. I love you all, and I'll catch you all in the next one.